Chapter 85 The Bossy of Qingyu Hall. Coming to the selected address of the bookstore on Dongchuan Road, Fan Xian and his group took a good look and found that the location was indeed still quite good, with convenient transportation all around and not too far from the Imperial College, so that students coming to Kyoto from all over Qing to prepare for their exams basically had to pass by here every day. The most crucial thing was that this place was not too busy, so it was convenient for the princesses of the royal families and the ladies of the official families to send their personal maids to buy books. Fan Xian nodded and walked inside with Fan Xizhe, and when he came face to face, he looked at those Qing guests in the mansion and bowed his hand. "Mr. Cui, please." That Mr. Cui smiled bitterly and said, "I say to you two young masters, such a bookstore can earn a few dollars a year, and to expend so much spirit, it is really a bit unworthy." Fan Xian knew that these former officials who had once been in charge of the ministry of the household would of course not take this kind of business of a few thousand taels of silver running down the drain in their eyes, and explained with a smile, "Since my younger brother enjoys it, let him play with it." He hadn't expected this to stay hidden from Sananbo, so he had asked a few pursers in the house to help, and since his father had allowed Mr. Cui to come and help, it was tantamount to tacitly approving of his two sons' nonsense outside the house. A few people in the back room talking, Fan Xizhe biting the brush bar and calculating something, once in front of the eyes, put a book of accounts, this guy will be in the middle of it, will be outside the body, all forget. Speaking, from the Qingyu Hall invited the shopkeeper also came, the shopkeeper face loyal, eyes and no light, but a clear, the so-called eyes positive person positive, Fan Xizhe some satisfaction, since he went with him to account for the matter of the bookstore. Fan Ruo has long been the first 60-some of the Dream of the Red Chamber manuscript to Fan Xizhe. Mr. Cui has been sent in the Hall of 10,000 Pines staring at the printing, there should not be any problem. Fan Sichert also urged Fan Xian to get the later drafts, ready to hit the ground running in Kyoto, but Fan Xian did not have the heart to copy the book these days, so he has been pushing it back. After agreeing on the opening time of the bookstore, and confirming that the approval of the 8 departments of the supervisory yuan can definitely be obtained, the people in the inner room found that there was nothing more to do. When the time came to get some scriptures, histories, and books from the Hall of 10,000 Pines, and then the main focus of the Book of the Stone, it seems to be waiting for the money to be collected. As for the fellows, all of them were handled by the treasurer of Qingyu Hall, and there was no need for the Fan family to worry about them. Fan Xian had wondered why everyone trusted Qing Yutang so much, and when he had a hard time getting a chance to be alone with the shopkeeper, he asked gently, "What's your name, shopkeeper?" The shopkeeper smiled and replied, "Your name is Yi." Fan Xian's heart trembled as he repeated, "Surname Yi?" The shopkeeper seemed to see the difference in him, and responded with some confusion, "Yes, there are 17 shopkeepers in Qing Yutang, all of whom are surnamed Yi, and this is a well-known thing in Kyoto, young Master Fan." "All surnamed Yi?" Fan Xian asked with a frown, "What is your relationship with the Yi family from 20 years ago?" The shopkeeper was slightly surprised and looked at Fan Xian twice, giving birth to some sense of vicissitude. "So many years have passed, I thought that young people nowadays would have long since lost track of the Yi family." "Not bad, we are all the boss of the Yi family back then the Yi family had some problems, the industry all didn't enter the palace, and we these people should have left to find our own way to live, but I don't know why. The imperial court doesn't allow us to do business on our own, so up to now it's such an embarrassing situation, we can only be responsible for taking care of the business for people, but can't get into the stock by ourselves, and that's how this Qing Yutang also came to be." Fan Xian then looked at this shopkeeper, know that the other party is his mother's subordinate back then, cannot help but give birth to some sense of intimacy, curiously asked, "Yi family after the incident, the court did not." The words did not finish, but the shopkeeper also understands the meaning of the so-called cut off the roots and roots, since the court even Yi family's industry are overrun, cut off no still keep these old man's meaning, the shopkeeper somehow also feel in front of this Fanfu young master is very kind, thought for a moment and replied, "We also feel strange, so these years, has been living a very scared, the court and not allowed us to leave the capital, so very afraid of how it will be one day. Take me to Qingyu Hall one day." Fan Xian suddenly found a place in Kyoto that had a connection to his mother's past, and could not help but be pleasantly surprised. Grasping the shopkeeper's shoulders, "There are many, many things I want to ask you." After returning to the Fan Mansion, in his father's study, Fan Xian told him about what he had met today, and asked curiously, "Qing Yutang, is it really the Yi family's old man from back then?" "Of course it is." Fan Jian stroked his short beard under his jaw and seemed to be reminiscing about the past, saying leisurely, "These people are actually very uncomplicated. Back then, they were all the Yi family's big shopkeepers stationed in various states. Only that your mother offended the powerful and wealthy back then and suffered misfortune. You also know that Yi's Yi family is what kind of scenery. The court for a time also some panic. If the Yi family fell, the Qing dynasty is afraid to be in chaos for decades. So finally came up with a compromise law, first the Yi family to the royal family, at least in name, to cut off the possibility of those following officials to take the opportunity to extort greatly, and then..." Fan Xian cut off his words and asked, "How exactly did the enemy who killed my mother die in the end?" This was a question he had been somewhat puzzled by. Fan Jian looked into his eyes and said coldly, "You are young, so you probably don't remember what happened in Qing 14 years ago." "Remember?" Fan Xian frowned and said, 14 years ago, it seemed that someone was intent on changing the sky, wanting to pull His Majesty down from the throne, so in the end, a lot of things happened. Kyoto killed for a whole month, killing almost all of those original aristocrats. Blood flowed, the aristocrats' heads resting on the city walls actually lined up for a mile. This is what is known as Kyoto Bloodshed Month, although I haven't experienced it. Although I have not experienced it, I have heard Mr. Fate speak of it many times. Not bad. Fan Jian said in a chilling voice, "During this purge, all those who had a part in the plot against the Yi family were killed by us." Fan Xian noticed the word "we" in his father's words and asked in a small voice, "Who are we?" "Naturally, it's me and Qin Pingping." Fan Jian smiled, "This is probably our most successful operation in the 20 years we have been following His Majesty." The Fan family also took advantage of this incident to rise to prominence, while the supervisory court has even more firmly established its influence amongst the officials because of the horrific role it played in this incident. Fan Xian sighed. It turns out that the cause of this change of heart was actually Father and Lord Qin avenging their mother's death. What happened afterward? Fan Xian asked about the Yi family. As I said earlier, the Yi family's estate was received into the internal treasury, which was the best way for stabilizing the dynasty at the time, and with a dynasty full of civil servants, it was impossible to come up with a more effective proposal. Fan Jian explained, "The problem is those big bosses, they were all taught by your mother, although they are far from your mother's heavenly wisdom, but if they are left unchecked, who knows if there will be a second Yi family? So His Majesty decided to centralize them all in Kyoto and let them retrain some of their manpower to take over those businesses, but forbid them from owning the real industry, which led to the now famous Qing Yutang in Kyoto. If you guys want to do business, it's good to look for them." Fan Xian said sadly, "These shopkeepers were actually forced to be stuck in Kyoto for more than 10 years because of such a reason. It's really tragic." "Father, if all these shopkeepers are put to use, will it attract the attention of the imperial court?" Fan Jian shook his head. Using Qing Yutang's shopkeepers is originally the favorite technique of the private industries of the various royal families. The imperial court won't care about that. But if you want to search all 17 of those shopkeepers of Qing Yutang, it doesn't seem to be necessary. If the imperial court is really jealous of all this, why didn't they kill all of these shopkeepers in the first place? Fan Xian raised his own question. Fan Jian looked at his son and smiled as he explained, "Back then, when your mother's accident happened, I was following His Majesty's battle in the west, and Qin Pingping had gone to the border between this dynasty and northern Qi to carry out a secret mission, and only realized halfway through that she had turned back to Kyoto. If we have all returned to Kyoto and still let these people be killed, you have underestimated your father's power." Lu knocked on the door outside, and when father and son stopped talking, Fan Jian let her in. Seeing the bowl of fruit syrup in Lu's hand, Fan Xian realized that the night was already late, and that it was already time for his father to go to sleep, and stood up, ready to take his leave. However, Uncle Sinan waved his hand and asked him to stay, allowing Lu to go and rest on her own. Before Lu's departure, Fan Xian glanced at the woman's eyes and saw a trace of worry. Knowing that she was worried about her husband's health, he couldn't help but frown slightly, thinking that this woman was afraid that her father really had a few feelings for her. But it's a pity that her heart was too hard, and that she had done that kind of thing back then. He knew that since his father did not let himself go, it must be an important thing to be accounted for, so he washed his ears and listened. Tell us about the recent situation inside the court. Sinan Bo Fan Jian picked up the slightly warmed fruit pulp sub and slowly sipped it. I know you've still been resenting what happened 4 years ago when the Lu clan sent someone to poison you. Fan Xian was stunned, not realizing what the situation inside the court had to do with the Lu clan, and even more so, he didn't think that his father would be so forthright in picking this matter apart, so for a moment he didn't know what he should say. The two things are actually interrelated. Fan Jian knew what his son was thinking and said indifferently, the reason why Lu made her move 4 years ago, on the one hand, it was because Sija's age was getting older, but she was getting less and less decent, and since I had not been able to write her, she could not help but be a bit desperate, and in a moment of stupefaction, she made that decision. But the more crucial reason was because she had once entered the palace at that time, and had been assured by someone that once you died, Fan Sijia would definitely be able to inherit all of the Fan family in the future. Entered the palace? Whose assurance was it that could make her even disregard her grandmother's life? Fan Xian said coldly.